Hello there, everybody. Travis Huckaby here with Navionics. Today we're going to go over a few things about pre-spawn patterns for this time of the year, what these bass are doing. I'm just going to try to help you guys locate them and catch more fish when it counts. We're going to be going over a few things, and you guys can feel free to ask questions. And I have a partner here, Tyler, that'll be chiming in whenever we get a question come up. Or also afterwards, you can feel free to email me any questions that you have on pre-spawn and bass patterns or anything to do with Navionics. So we'll go ahead and get started here. It's 7 o'clock, so hope everyone's had a good evening. And I just want to kind of have a little fun here and get to a point where everyone can learn a little something. I can help you guys out. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the main things that go along with pre-spawn. What we're looking at is these fish, they're just coming out of the winter pattern, out of the main lakes where it's a little bit of the deeper water, especially out here. I'm from California. We got the mother lode lakes out here that are deeper water. So during the winter, these fish are out there, shoot up to 60 feet deep in the coldest point of the winter there. And then they start pushing up as the weather warms. So we're going to start looking at, talking about some water temp, some location and structures, and some techniques on how to catch them. So we'll move along with that. And as we go, usually as January and February progress and you got the trees starting to bloom and everything, things starting to warm up, the water temp starts getting into the low mid-50s there. Those fish start moving up and making their way out of that main lake. So they start doing their migration pattern towards the mouths of the coves, and as it warms up and the temperatures get warmer, they proceed to the back of the coves. So a few of the areas as these fish make their way on their migration routes, you want to look for areas such as main lake points, creek channels, secondary points, creek channel bends, coves, pockets within the coves and towards the back, and flats. And then also as you're working your way back, you definitely want to look for what I call spots within a spot, or the honey hole of the area. We got rock piles, trees, stump beds, and banks with some chunk rock, good stuff like that. Because a lot of these structures, especially rock, they warm up faster with whenever the sunlight gets on them. So those fish like to get there to that warmer area and kind of push up. This time of the year, February, March, you're going to be looking, those fish are going to move up in 20 foot or so, 20, 30 feet on those main lake points as their first stop usually. Or they'll push up, they'll be out on the main lake points and then push up as the day warms up and the days get longer. They'll push up more in the 20-foot mark. So, and then as everything progresses, they're going to move into the creek channels and come on back to the secondary points. And as they follow the creek channels and the secondary points, you can really get on them pretty good in the creek channel bends. You got these fish, they're schooling up and looking for bait fish and crawfish. They're really looking to bulk up at this time of the year on protein and stuff to help the enzymes with their eggs, and just kind of feeding up from coming from the winter haunts of a slow metabolism. So whenever you come up on these creek channel bends and the secondary points, you're going to be keying in on a lot of like bait fish presentations and crawfish presentations. Then as you work your way back into the pockets and the flats, that kind of tapers into almost where we're at right now. Those fish are moving along pretty well. So, and they're moving up. You can really catch them up in the shallows nowadays, or this time of the year. with the water temps now, we're seeing 60 to mid 60s now. So these fish are definitely heavy on the pattern of pre-spawn. So they're getting back in the mouth of those pockets and out here on the right at the mouth of deeper water parts of the flats. So if you can locate any of those portions right there, the creek channels, the coves, or the pockets, or the creek channel bends, and you can come up with some of the structures such as like the rock piles or trees or the stump rock, the stump beds or the chunk rock, you really got an area within an area that those bass are they're gonna stay on there for a couple weeks as they continue on towards the back of the coves. And what I have here, I'm getting into more of the layouts. Whenever you get fishing this time of the year, we've already gone through, your main lake points, your secondary points. This is a screenshot from the Navionics computer app. And what it is I've got some areas here to help you kind of decipher if you're looking at your Navionics map or even just the paper topographical map. We got the red arrows there. They indicate the main lake points. And then we go on to the yellow. And it's kind of like the red, the yellow, and the black. It's kind of stage one is red. That's whenever they're first coming out of that winter pattern. They're pulling up there on the main lake points, and then they're going to transition as the water gets a little warmer. They start making their way back into the cove. That's when you really start running into the yellow areas, the secondary points. Now, whenever it comes to the secondary points, you always want to kind of use your key on your electronics, because your electronics I'm a big fan. I run Hummingbirds. I got my Hummingbird and my Navionics Platinum chip in it. A lot of this stuff, as you can see on the topographical map here, the secondary points a lot of the time aren't visual by the bank. But if you understand how to read the topographical maps, you could tell that it could look like just a nothing on it, just a plain bank. But under the water there's actually a secondary point that jetties out that those fish will hold on. And a lot of the weekend fishermen really don't key on that type of structure because they don't know it's there if they don't have the new technology per se these days, of the good graphs and the Navionics, and don't know how to use the topographical features. So moving on with the yellow areas there, that's two good secondary points. And what that is you got the main lake, comes off to those secondaries, and they're right there at the mouth of a spawning flat or a spawning cove. So those things right there will load up big time with some big fish. And a lot of times, the males will move up into that flat first. And those big females, they'll suspend out there off of those points. And it's one of those deals, they'll be out there from 30 feet deep, and they can push up at the end of the day. A lot of times, especially the last couple of weeks, been going out quite a bit on the water, and you're catching fish early in the morning, about 20, 25 feet deep. You can get up there in the afternoon, find those fish kind of cruising around in the shallows now. And they'll come up there on those points and kind of sun themselves and show themselves. And it's pretty impressive on the size fish you'll see staging up out on those points. And all they're doing is, it's like a waiting area. They're feeding up out there, and they're just getting ready for the temps to get right to move back into those coves and the spawning flats to do their spawning. So what we have here is, I just kind of wanted to go over with you guys some features of a topographical map here. This is off the Navionics map on my cell phone. And like I said, Navionics, they have a cell phone app and a computer app from home. And now those two different apps are really convenient. I mean, these cell phone apps, you can download it to your cell phone and have it on you at all times. And whenever you go out, a lot of guys will have questions with, if I don't have any cell phone service, my map won't work, will it? And the answer is yes. It's like your GPS signal on your bass boats, on your units. they got GPS tracking, the phone will do the same thing. You'll have your GPS location on your cell phone as you're out on the water. So it definitely comes in handy. The old saying, you never leave home without it. So, and one of the main things that I like is my Navionics app for my computer at home. I fish FLW, so I cruise around California. We'll go down to Arizona to Havasu, and some new lakes that I haven't adventured out on per se, like last year was my first time to Lake Havasu. We went down there, and before I even started into the practice period or anything, I was spending a couple hours a night at home on my computer looking over the Navionics app, just trying to get familiar with the lake because I had never been there. So I knew in the fall what those fish were looking for and kind of the areas to look for the ingredients in the areas that I really wanted to fish. So being able to do it from my own home, take sections of the lake and figure out where I wanted to start my practice before I even got there was a huge key to my success down there. I ended up actually taking second place and missed the win by 1.5 ounces. And it was very awesome because by the time I got down there, I never even been on the water, and I had about 6 key areas I wanted to look at. And 4 of the areas that I found, just from home on the Navionics app actually held the fish that I caught in the tournament to take second place. So with that, going on, it's a very, very handy practice tool in my book. I even use it, I'm a huge California Delta fan. I'm always out there, and even before I go out there, I know a lot of water out there. I'll always even take a look at certain places, like, I caught them pretty good, last week in these areas, and I'll try to go onto my app and look around and search for areas that resemble of the areas that I caught them in. So with that being said, whenever you're using that thing at home, your time's more effective. Your time on the water is when it counts. So you really don't want to be out there idling around all day looking for certain things. It's one of those deals where you can get there at home, figure out your waypoints, the areas you want to go. As soon as you put that boat on the water, you can head straight to those areas and start fishing. And that right there saves, with these days and age, it's one of those deals that it helps a lot with gas and just your time, your practice time. Just practice on the time on the water. You got to keep it efficient so you can pretty much cover as much water as you can to find these guys these days. So with that being said, we'll kind of take a look here at this this snapshot of my Navionics app. You got a few things here. You got a nice little creek channel that comes in from the north to the south here and then runs out the back in a nice cove. Now, with contour lines, reading a topographical map, you can see the lines that are stacked closer together, per se, in this area here is a steeper structure. That's going to be a bank that's got a pretty good break to it or drop off in comparison to, say, right up here. This would be a tapering point, per se. So as you follow it on the way back, you see areas such as this here. You got it's a nice point, and then you have a deeper section here that the break would be on, and then it kind of works its way back to the back corner here into this cut as a flat. Now that's for this time of the year for pre-spawn. This area is a great area this time of the year. These fish will be out here in the deeper areas off the main lake, off of these points, and you got pretty much a creek channel heading off up here, coming down south to the bottom here, and making a finger off here to the east. Now you got a good point that comes out here, and a great point that comes out here. Now, those fish should be out here during the winter time in the deeper points of that creek channel, right at the mouth, just out here on their deeper water haunts, Now they're going to push up onto these points and kind of work their way back. And this area here is a sweet spot. You got an area that's got 2 points on it. You have a tapering bank, and then you have a section of the point here that actually has a fast break to deep water. Now, with these bigger fish, I find that they like to have a deep water access route. Something where they don't have to swim as far, like, you know, they don't have to swim 100 yards out to find deeper water. Those fish can go 10 yards out, but straight down, and they're in their own little comfort zone. So a lot of times those fish will just stage right off of the ledges here on the flats, or off this point here on this ledge. And then these circles up here represent an island top. That's going to be a contour change that is more than likely, if I had the depth features on here, would show that that island top right there is probably in about I'd say 60 feet at lake level, and everything around that thing drops off into like 100, 120, 180 feet, and then into like 250 feet in the channel. So those fish will work their way up, and especially here in California, our lakes are, the water levels are down, so those fish will pretty much live out here. I call them resident fish. A lot of the time they'll actually just stay out here on this deeper break, suspend. When the time comes right, they'll get up and start cruising the shallows in the point. And then whenever it gets right, they'll push up here on top of the submerged island tops and actually spawn in the main lake. And that's kind of one of the tips up here for the California motherlode stuff. Those fish, you know, theoretically, they always push in the back of the creek channels and the back of the coves. They get there into the secluded backwaters where it kind of warms up a bit. But later in the, you know, whenever it comes into the spawn time, I'll get to that in the next episode. But those are definitely key areas to look for, because like I call it, it's like a residential. You know, those are resident fish. They'll live out there. They got the points. They got creek channel bringing them food. They got shallow water to move up on, deeper water to move off to if they get skittish, you know, on those bluebird days where there's no, you know, the light penetration's heavy. They'll get out there and hang out off the ledges. So what we got here, this thing wants to get ahead of the game, but we'll back it up a notch. You got a nice main lake point coming out, another main lake point coming out, but as I said before, if it wasn't for apps such as Navionics or topographical maps, you wouldn't know this was out there by looking at the bank. So that's one of the things that I really want to stress on is technology these days is a huge key to catching these fish. You know, these fish out here have half the pressure as all those fish that the weekend anglers go to whenever they go down, put the trolling motor down, and just throw casts at the bank. They're out there, you know, fishing the bank, and these fish are just living their normal day-to-day life out here in the deeper water, being untouched until someone comes along with some electronics and figures them out and sacks them up pretty good. So with that being said, just kind of wanted to, like I said, key on some, we got the creek channel points that are meeting the creek channels, and some of the best areas that I really like is, per se, this one right here where you have a creek channel coming in, and then you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and even 5 fingers that feed off of this. So that's a lot of things going on in a single area, a lot of sweet spots. So just wanted to go over and show you what it looked like on the topographical features, about the points, the submerged island tops, and what the creek channels look like. And I was talking even, you know, on the last page there, creek channel bends. Certain things like these pockets here, they'll push off of this and want to move back into these cuts. Sorry about that. Don't want to move back into these cuts here. But as they go, they can move to this secondary point here. And then this pocket could have some wood in it. they're going to push back in that wood, feel secluded, and eat some bait fish as it comes through, and kind of just gradually migrate back towards the back until, you know, the water temps and everything gets right. So that is just one of the key patterns for the motherlode lakes up here. Or, you know, I just wanted to get you guys acclimated to what the topographical maps features look like. So we'll move on to the next page. This here is just pretty much a zoomed up page that I just went over that really shows like the depth contours. Like I said, up here in California, the water levels are really low. So per se, you got this submerged island top out here. This is like a really good area. The water levels are low at the moment, so the actual top of that island is almost out of water right now because of the drought out here. But the issue is being able to locate those areas. Don't push out here and pre-spawn and just kind of move up and down. And then whenever it comes time, they will actually spawn out there. And a lot of the time, that's where you get your bigger bites, is getting out here and coming to the main lake and following these underwater submerged islands that are right off of these creek channels. So now we got another area here. This is kind of moving back. Now we went over your main things in the lake, such as, you know, the submerged island tops, the mouth of the coves, the points, and the secondaries, which is pretty much, you know, to be honest with you, we're almost past that point, but into the pre-spawn time of the year, these fish are already moved pretty deep in these cuts and creeks nowadays. But never, you know, those fish won't be dormant out there they're always going to be pre-spawn staging fish out there on those points at the mouths and those islands out there that like I call resident fish. They're going to do their thing out there and not really do the migration route. But the majority of the fish are going to do the migration to the back of the cuts. So here's another clip from a Navionics app where this is going into the back of a creek channel on a lake called, up here local, called Don Pedro. This area is an awesome location for catching pre-spawn fish and spawn fish. They're pretty much, like I said, doing their migration route through the creek channels, and they're coming up in here and getting on these points and moving into these creek channel swings and moving all the way back into these deeper channels. And all they have to do when the time's right is come up and do their spawn. And then it's pretty much one of those deals that they can sit out there till the time's right. And being that it's in a creek channel, it's going to have, you know, bait fish brought to them, the whole nine. So they're just going to suspend back there, feed up, and then that water temp gets right and the moon phases get right, they're going to push up and do their work. But until then, it's one of those deals that creek channels, you know, and the secondary points per se, and the bends is keys. Like for instance here where you see the 10, that's an awesome area. And a matter of fact, that one's actually got some big chunk rock and some wood on it. I've caught a couple big fish in that area on swim baits, where this is like a rock flat here that goes out to some wood on this point with rock. Those big girls get out there and they just kind of suspend over those rocks and then in that wood, just waiting to make the move up into the flats. So that's one of the areas I like to key on, and it has just a lot of the simple ingredients. Like I said, these fish are just making their way to the back of the creek channels and the coves. And one of the main things you want to work on your watch as you're working your way back to the back of these cuts with these fish is try to always look for areas that is secluded, a little bit out of the wind, you know, stuff like that is a huge key to keeping the water temps warm. And the water temp deal is a big thing to me. I like to look in the back, you know, in the back of the creeks, and either the north end or the south end of the lake. A lot of the lakes up here, the south end will warm up quicker than the north. So with that being said, it's just always the warmer the water, the more they're going to push towards the back of the creek. So if you figure those fish out, or if you make a run up north, you know, it's one of those deals. You make a run up north and your water temp's 60 degrees. You make a run down south, you find some 64, 65 degree water temp. You're going to start a little deeper into the creek channels. I would kind of bypass the main lake point and run straight in, watching my hummingbirds side imaging and hitting a lot of these little secondary points on the way back into the creek channel. Because the warmer the weather, the warmer the water temp, the farther back these fish are really going to push. So makes them more, just kind of takes a little guessing out of it. Just water temp is a huge key this time of the year. So for a lot of my California guys out here, I just wanted to touch base also on a little bit of the Delta. The Delta can be kind of tricky, which lakes and, lakes don't have what the Delta's got, being, it's a tidal influenced waterway. Now, I'm just going to kind of switch gears a little bit on you guys here, go with a little bit of the Delta stuff, things that I really key in on, because the Delta is a shallow waterway. On the Delta, a lot of these fish, they're looking same as the lake. I like to use the phrase, a bass is a bass. So in the winter, they're looking for the deeper water, and coming into the pre-spawn, they're looking to find the same thing. They're working their way out of the deeper water, trying to find the warmer water and get back in the spawning flats, these flooded lakes, like per se. I'll give this area here. It's a real popular area of the Delta. It's called Mildred Island. Now, what we got here, it even has a little red fish symbol. It's kind of funny. A lot of fish this time of the year, they're already actually working their way into this flat. I was out on Friday and caught a couple good fish in here. So, but these fish are already working their way up into the flats, but there's still a big wave, All these fish don't swim up and spawn at once, so they work their way in, they migrate in, and it's one of those things. You're going to have a month and a half to 2 months, and there's going to be a few different waves of spawn, and there's always going to have some pre-spawn fish, waiting to push up and make their move for the flat. So on the Delta, a lot of times, I like looking into staying on the outside of the flooded islands in the deeper water with a little bit of current, because these fish are looking to feed up, like I said, to nutrients or eggs to make the move into the back of the flooded ponds like Mildred here. So I like to key on, on the openings is pretty much the key, is the openings to Mildred Island. You got the deeper water on the outside, and then you have the moving water, which these fish are now feeding up, so they're going to be right there, and then the water funnels. It funnels out because you got high and low tide. The water is going to be pushing in on high tide and then moving out on low tide. So these fish will position out here either facing in or facing out, and let that current bring that food to them as they kind of replenish themselves from the winter off there and getting their protein ready for the spawning cycle ahead. And then a lot of the stuff here, like I said, I key on breaks, current. A lot of the times, even like these flats here, as you can see, these fish will move up in here and spawn, but they're going to stage out here. It's like a lake. It's a point. They'll stage on these points here, here, and over here. And like I said, you can catch those fish anywhere from February to end of April. And they're just kind of staging up there, ready to move in here and kind of do their thing in the spawning flats. So with all that being said, a lot of things just on the Delta, just keying in on is even such small breaks. I have all this stuff waypointed, and I'll pretty much run and gun all this stuff this time of the year. And like I said, that's going to be the higher percentage area to catch these fish. And a lot of the bigger fish will just sit right out there. A big fish wants an easy meal. So they're going to let that current bring it to them instead of chasing it down. All right, guys, let's see here. Next, we're going to go on to some techniques and baits that I use this time of the year. Now, here's a little bit of my arsenal. I keep everything really simple. This time of the year in the lakes, some of my key baits is like per se here. It's a 3/4 ounce pull ball head jig. I like fishing, that's early in the pre-spawn when those fish are on the main lake points and secondary points. I like to get out there, throw that thing 20 to 30 feet of water, drag it around. And that's a big bait for a big female, so it's kind of like a one and done. They like that bigger. They don't have to chase a bunch of little bait fish around. They're just going to eat a big crawdad, get a good source of protein, and be full off of it. So I like throwing the bigger jig out there on the main lake points and secondary points. And then when I locate those points and stuff that have, say, rock or wood, one of the key areas in the lakes these days, or not these days, but in my preference, with our water levels out here dropping, is you have creek channels that have a lot of wood in them. And the water levels are dropping out. So these fish are either going to back off a little bit off the bank due to the dropping water level and suspend. And one of the key things that I like doing this year, or doing this time of the year, is throwing glide baits. I'm a huge glide bait fan. The River to Sea S-Waver and the depth side swimmer. Those two baits are they're always on the deck of my boat for the mother lode lakes up here. I like to focus on the wood, the trees that are off the bank. I mean, even if you pull up in an area and you got trees down this bank, they're out. Say the tree is standing in 50 feet of water. I like to throw that glide bait around it. It's one of those deals that those fish with the dropping water levels and everything, they like to be off. They like to have a little water around them, and they'll suspend in those treetops. So, and especially this time of the year, those big females, they got that bank. They're waiting. Those males are going up there looking around, doing their thing, building beds. Those females are just pushed off some, and they're just suspended out there. And a lot of times, those big, slow glide baits, those females can't resist them. They'll come up out of that tree, and they're either going to show themselves or let you know they're there by almost ripping the rod out of your hand. So that's definitely one of my huge keys to fishing the mother lode is these glide baits. It's one of those deals that you could lose a couple baits, but these glide baits don't really, aren't really a deep water runner. I always throw mine in the top, I'd say 5 to 10 feet. And only reason I'm getting them down that deep even is, I'll doctor them up with some leads, some suspending dots and some fluorocarbon line. It helps them get down a little deeper than per se a monofilament that floats. So just keeping them, just keeping them around the wood. Those, like I said, the females will spin, and that's one of the kind of the key factors of getting the bigger fish in the boat. I mean, I fish a more aggressive style, kind of as you can see here. I got the swim baits and a jig. I don't really fish a lot with a drop shot or shaky head, unless I'm really going after a spotted bass or even smallmouth. I'll change it up a little bit there, but whenever it counts and you're fishing a tournament, you're looking for 5 bites. So I'm always keying into a bigger bait, so that trying to get that bigger bite. And these bigger females, like I said, they're not looking to exert a bunch of energy, but they're looking for a good meal, so they'll take down that glide bait in a hurry. So we've got pretty much the two, couple of the water columns there. Early pre-spawn, I like the jig. Later in the pre-spawn, when they start working their way back, that glide bait is a huge key to me on the mother lode lakes, or per se the lakes. Now, whenever it comes over, and I switch things up and take it into the delta, I really, two of my favorite thing on the delta to throw is a swim bait. I throw a lot of the line through swim baits there, as you see, from Reflection swim baits, and I'll also still throw the S-Waver. That's the line through and the S-Waver. It's You can throw those two both, you know, in those runways in those flooded ponds, and especially on low tide, you just kind of throw them outside the weed lines that build up on those points where those fish just stage and wait, and they can't resist that big, easy, slow meal coming through there. And that's really a way to get a big bite, is throwing that swim bait or a glide bait on the outside of the weed lines and those runways. So it's that's one of my main keys, is the swim baits on the Delta. A lot of people don't throw them, you know, but some of the guys that are catching the bigger fish, they really key on those things. So I'll let the cat out of the bag on that one, which a lot of the Delta guys know about the swim bait bite, but don't be afraid to get out there and chuck and wind a swim bait somewhere on those grass flats and those runways that are leading into those flooded ponds. And then also another key bait there that I like to fish fast and aggressive with is either the river to sea bling spinnerbait or the chatterbait. Those two you can fish fast, cover a lot of water, and those fish, like I said, are feeding up right now, so they're really active. Early morning points with current on them. You know, you got a couple ingredients that you're really looking for that they're looking to feed up, so you can get those reaction fish going really well this time of the year. And like I said, on those you're going to be looking for the pre-spawn fish. They're going to be around those flooded ponds, looking for the in and the outlets to them. And then also you're going to be looking kind of at the dead end sloughs. Those always warm up faster. So like I said, either if you're on the Delta or the mother lode lakes, the secluded areas warm up a lot quicker than per se the open areas that gets the cool northwest wind at night or any stuff like that that'll cool the water temps down. So, and always remember, the less water movement you have, the warmer the water will build up to be. The areas with high current, stuff like that in the Delta, is always a little cooler. So, and then as far as you can see here on the snapshot here, the Cinco, for the guys hitting the California Delta, you can never go wrong this time of the year in pre-spawn. Pitching that Cinco around the grass clumps, and then the hard Tule islands. Those fish start moving up, staging on those islands, on those points, and on just the deeper water. I mean, you can have an island out here with 2-3 feet on one side of it and 11-12 feet on the other side. You know, don't be afraid to get out there on the deeper side this time of the year. Flip that Cinco. You know, a lot of my bigger bites on that Cinco come in 6 to 8 feet of water, especially this time of the year. So don't be afraid of flipping that deeper water with that Cinco. It takes a little more patience, but it'll pay off. So, all right, everybody. Well, I'm just kind of getting down. I don't want to beat a dead horse or nothing. We're getting into the end of this here. We're going to wind it down. So if anyone has any questions or comments, you can feel free to ask, or feel free to email me, or also check out my Facebook page, just Travis Huckaby, and we can always talk fishing anytime you guys need anything. So I hope a little bit of the information I shared tonight was a help out to you guys. But like I said, if there's anything you're unclear on, feel free to shoot me an email or message me on Facebook, and we'll clear it all up. So I'll let you guys get back to your evening, and hope everyone learned something. I appreciate you guys' time for listening in. Thank you.
We've got some people on there. So the first question is, what kind of baits do you fish for deeper water, 20 or 30 feet?
20 or 30 feet. If I'm out there out here on the lakes, like I said, that the 3/4 ounce football jig is my go-to. And like I said, I'm fishing for 5 good bites majority of the time. So that football jig and the 3/4 ounce, I'll throw it out there, and I like to throw it on those main lake points and secondaries into the, say, my main thing with throwing that thing is I like putting the boat in shallow water, and I'll use an uphill retrieve. I'll fire that football jig out there in 30, 40 feet and kind of work it up the water column. And then another bait that I like throwing this time of the year in the deeper water, other than per se like a drop shot or a shaky head, that's two other good baits to throw in the deeper water, would be the Cinco. And I like throwing the Cinco on like an inchy wacky hook. It's a weighted hook, and you hook the Cinco wacky style. And then that little, I think it's like a 3/16 ounce head that I like to use. Throwing it on that weight, it gets the Cinco down there a little faster. So for guys like me that's not as patient, I want that bait to get down there to those fish. So I like weighting that Cinco. And this time of the year, that Cinco really does a lot of damage, even if you throw it out there deep or up shallow in the lakes or the delta.
Perfect.
Okay.
I have another one. This is from Jake from Tennessee. He wants to know if you have any recommendations for river fishing.
River fishing. Let's see here. River fishing this time of the year. That's one of my favorite things to do out here. I get out here in the San Joaquin River, and a lot of these fish, the main keys you're looking for, Jake, is finding the offshoots. Like I know like an offshoot could be like a little drainage ditch or something. We have a lot of them out here that come off the river and go maybe 100 yards, and they're a little wide, maybe 2 boats wide, and they go back to irrigation pumps. But what these fish do is they're looking for an eddy or a current break to kind of stage and do their spawn thing with. They're because the main thing of pre-spawn is they're working their way up to the spawn, so they're looking for the backwater areas away from current and some warmer water temps. So the key would be trying just to find any of those backwater eddies and secluded areas where there's not a lot of current really to what they're not wanting the eggs to wash off, to be washed away. So just keying on those secluded areas and eddies, which is an eddy is a current break, is where those fish will stage up and feed. So
perfect. Now, what colors do you prefer for pre-spawn? That's another question that came through.
Oh, okay. If I'm up on the lakes here, I keep most of, as you can see, the baits that I had up on the screenshot is all pretty much like a chartreuse shad, real neutral colors. Like my Cincos, I keep like the green pumpkin, watermelon black flake. I keep everything pretty much earth tone. But I will let you know something. Going up here to the lakes, this time of the year, just to put fish in the boat, like one of my main things is if I want to go out and catch fish, if I'm taking a friend out, or even if per se I'm in a tournament and I get in trouble, or I can't get that big bite going, there's a color out here from RoboWorm. It's called Morning Dawn. It's like a pink color with a blue bloodline, and that's really is kind of, I throw the Morning Dawn. And then another color from RoboWorm called the MM3. It's a Margarita Mutilator. It's a purple with red flake and a brown belly. And for the West Coast out here, you can pretty much take that Margarita Mutilator and Morning Dawn and catch fish pretty much anywhere you go. Those have been a really good staple of catching fish and really getting me out of a bind in a couple instances. But other than that, just the crawdad pattern in the green and brown, or a bait fish pattern, a shad color, or for stained water, I like that chartreuse shad. So I just try to keep it simple.
Good. And now we have another question. It's, would you consider throwing the big swim baits and glide baits in Oklahoma lakes? Yes,
sir. Most definitely. Those glide baits, they're working all over the map right now. I got the pleasure to fish last week with an elite pro by the name of Jonathan Van Dam. He came out here getting ready for the California Delta, and he was digging around in my boat, and he seen, you know, a lot of my glide baits there per se, even that the slide swimmer from depths and that S-waver. And he was raving about taking those back east, going back to, you know, back when they go to Gunnersville and everything else, where those bigger fish are known to come from. And he's really looking forward to throwing the glide baits back east. So, and it's one of those things that, I mean, they're a bigger bait, but the nice thing about them is, you know, 3 and 4 pounders, 3 pounders lead them too. So you're not really just getting, you know, getting into a big fish bait. You can still throw those and key on 3-pound fish. You know, I mean, shoot, I've had, you know, small keeper-sized fish come up and slap that big side swimmer. So it's just one of those deals. I would throw that pretty much anywhere I go.
Good.
Yep.
Now, going back to your question about rivers, what baits do you use for the eddy when you're fishing the eddies?
On something like that, here, our rivers have a lot of stained water. So on the stained water, I like to throw jigs, like flipping jigs. I'll throw a like 3/8 ounce in a black and blue or an all brown. And just because, like I said, over here are water stained. But even if it was clear, I wouldn't throw a black and blue so much, but the brown and watermelon color, like a brown and a green color, with some red flake in it, it would be a huge pattern out here whenever the water clears up later in the year for us, is I'll really stick to, like I said, the earth tones. And, you know, I key on the shad pattern and the crawfish pattern out here. So I'd per se a jig, even spinner baits in the river. Yeah, the river, we catch them big time on the eddies, getting on the backside of the eddies, casting up past the eddy into the current, and bringing that spinner bait down with the current. It's really, you can get out there and really smash a lot of fish playing around throwing those reaction baits with the current. But you got to come and, whenever you throw that spinner bait up there past like that, say there's a rock, and the rock's breaking the water current. So behind the rock, there's going to be an eddy. You want to throw that spinner bait up there in that current and bring that spinner bait and make sure you hit the rock. You want it to pretty much deflect off the rock. Those fish love being able to be seeing a bait deflect off of a rock, a tree stump, something like that. It really gets a good reaction strike out of them. So if I was really keen on a river, I would be taking a spinnerbait and a jig. So you pretty much got a reaction bite and a bait you can flip, and then the old faithful drop shot. You know, hey, that right there will catch these bass anywhere in the United States. It seems like that's like the old faithful go-to. So that's kind of the 3 keys I would do: a reaction bait, a flip bait, you know, and a drop shot for when times get tough.
Good. And just to follow up to that, would you ever substitute a chatterbait for a spinnerbait?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a good question. Whenever I get around grass, if I get an area like we have out here, the California Delta, we have a lot of grass. Even per se, Lake Havasu. Lake Havasu out here is a clean lake, not much grass to it. There's some areas of tules and some stuff like that kind of remind you of the Delta. I went down there and took second place in a big federation deal, one of the state championships for the federation. And to be honest with you, I caught majority on my fish down there on a chatterbait. And I was just skipping a chatterbait back in the tule and grass. And I was throwing that chatterbait on braid. And the reason I like throwing that chatterbait on braid is when I get it back there in that grass, a spinnerbait, you know, the blades will get hung up and they don't come through the grass as well. Now, throwing that chatterbait on braid, I'll pitch it back in there and be bringing it out of the grass, and I can feel the weight of the grass. And all you got to do is really snap the rod. And with braid, it's a quicker reaction where it'll actually snap that grass off of it, and you can keep that chatterbait coming. With it's, you know, per se a little less weedless. You know, you could just snap it and get the weeds off and keep that bait coming along. And a lot of the times out here, with the grass, a lot of the bites come whenever you snap that bait. You can bring through the grass, snap it, and all of a sudden you almost get the rod knocked out of your hand. It's like they're right on it when they get that quick reaction movement. So yeah, whenever I'm around grass, I would definitely lean more towards the chatterbait.
Perfect. Now this is kind of a follow-up as well, but it's to what you talked about. But how do you fish if the fish have already spawned?
Have already spawned?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're looking at post-spawn fish. I'm a huge fan of topwater baits. Post-spawn fish, I love a buzzbait. I'm all about big baits when it comes to post-spawn. Those fish, it's gonna be one of those things that those fish are gonna want to get an easy meal. So a big like double buzzbait on the delta, is one of my favorite things to throw out there in the post spawn. You retrieve it real slow, and it's got a big profile and a lot of commotion. Now, those fish will come up and just destroy that bait because it's one of those deals. They're going to exert their energy on that big bite because it's going to be a one and done. They're going to have one meal, and they're going to be satisfied for a little bit. And they're not going to really have to go run and chase down other per se shad or any bait balls like that for a couple little bait fish. So I'm a huge fan of topwater. The spooks or the rover from river to sea, the walking style baits. That's huge in my arsenal. A frog and a buzz bait is my key. I always key on the topwater fish and post spawn.
Okay, it's got another question. What are your thoughts on the hydro wave?
On the hydro wave, to be honest with you, I never leave home without that thing cranked up. I've seen some great things out of that thing. Matter of fact, I was out last week, had a guy with me, and we were in the back of a cut in the delta, and we had some big shad built up back there, and they were just suspended right on the surface. They were really lethargic. They weren't very active. You can just kind of watch them. They were just sitting out there. And it was to me in that time, I was like, you know what? I want to see what this hydro wave is doing, because I've been with hydro wave now for about a year, and that was actually one of the instances where I could actually see the reaction of what the fish did. So those fish were up there, and I could see them. They were all just laying out on this flat, not moving, not doing much of anything. So I went through the settings on the hydro wave and went from pretty much a mellow bait fish to an active, and then into a feeding. Went kind of just through the progression levels, and the bait fish, those big shads, started moving around. And it was kind of neat. Once I got it up to the frenzy sound on that hydro wave, a lot of those bait fish actually congregated together and moved over towards the boat and kind of surrounded the front of the boat there where the speaker was. So that actually drew the bait fish to it. The way it worked, I was really impressed. That's for sure. And then another one of the nice things about the hydro wave is even when you're fishing jigs or flipping on the delta out here, I use it too because it actually has a crawfish clicking sound. And I like flipping the jigs and punching out here on the delta, so I'll turn it on the crawfish sound. And I've had some pretty good results punching with that, because a lot of the times those bass are under the grass and they're looking for crawdads that are attached to the hyacinth. And it's one of those deals that I've had some really good days on it. And it seems like once you turn that thing on, you pitch, like whenever you're punching grass, you're throwing that 1 ounce, I use 1 ounce tungsten weight a lot in like a Reaction Innovation beaver. And I'll pitch that thing over, shake it, and once it falls through, it's like if I have that hydro wave on the crawfish sound, it draws their attention up to the grass. So it's awesome due to the fact that once you punch it in there and you get it to fall through, it seems like they eat it on the fall rather than having to present it. It hits the bottom, shake it a couple times, hop it, and then they hit it. But no, with that hydro wave on, it seems to activate them and kind of draw their attention to it where they're looking up, and it seems to put it on, seems to get them to go for that bait right on the fall, because they're pretty much got their attention. You know, they hear the crawdad clicking, and they're drawn in on that, the attention of the craws. So, in my opinion, it's definitely worth the money.
Now, along with sound, I just got a question for you. What do you think about Livingston lures and the sound they produce?
Oh, man, to be totally honest, it's one of those deals that I haven't had much time with them. So, to be honest, I don't have a firm an experience with them to answer that question about them. If I threw them a little more and had an experience with them, I could answer that. But like I said, right now I don't really throw them too awfully much right now.
Okay. I think that's it. If anyone has any other questions, we have a couple more minutes. So send them in. If not, we'll let you go.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah, I got one more, and it's how important is it in general to fish with the current?
It is a huge key. That fishing, you always want to position the boat into the current. You want the nose of the boat facing the current, because you want to present your bait in a natural fashion. So whenever you're in the current and you're casting up, say you got a tule point. Now that current's coming around that tule point and coming at you. You're on your trolling motor. You want to cast past that point and bring your bait with the current, because whenever these fish position in the current, what they do is when they position facing into the current, because they're looking for, especially whenever they're ambushing in a eddy per se, like a point would be with current coming around it, they're looking into the current because the food, like bait fish and food source, would be flowing with the current instead of really per se going into the current. So I'm a firm believer of positioning the boat into the current and bringing the bait with the current as a natural look. And on the Delta, it's a huge key to catching these fish out here. There's positioning with, like I said, positioning into the current, cast into the current, and bring the bait with the current. So it's a natural representation. And also on that, you know, the bass, their eyes are on top of their head. They can't see what's underneath them. So if they're positioned and you're up current and you're throwing it down and bringing it against the current, and say it's a jig or something like that, it's going to have to get out in front of them before they actually get to see that bait. Now, if you're throwing it with the current, it's going to be coming at them, and they can see that bait coming. So that's two of my key factors, and a lot. I see it almost daily on the Delta. That's one of those things that that's a number one positioning thing on the Delta with your boat is always position into the current and work your way upstream into the current. And whenever you're fishing, cast out and bring your bait with the current.
Okay, perfect. We have one more question and about a minute left. So what is your favorite brand of jig?
My favorite brand of jig these days. It's kind of funny to say. I really like Revenge jigs and TNT jigs out here. I got two different ones there, and even, you know, I'll give CRL, California Reservoir Lures. They have a great color selection on their jigs. Those are, I would say, my my favorites. You know, but if I actually had to pick my number one favorite, it would be the California Reservoir Lure jig. They got great colors on their skirts, so that's definitely what I would lean towards. But a lot of the time when we're out here fishing, I love fishing rock. I love fishing wood, so I'm losing a lot of jigs a lot of the times. I like to pour my own, and I just keep it really simple. You know, I'll pour the 3/4 ounce football head and just throw a brown skirt on them, in a like a watermelon red flake trailer, or a watermelon, or a brown and purple double tail trailer on them. And that way it's a lot less cost effective, because like I said, I'll throw those things up in a tree, into a tree looking for a suspended fish, or in the rocks, So I'm either pulling my own or California reservoir lures, just because I like their the color patterns that they have available.
All right, well, that's all the questions.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you guys were able to pick up something from this. And like I said, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me, thuckaby@navionics.com. And thank you all for attending. So hope you have a good evening. And I'll be closing this webinar out. Thank you very much.